Somewhere in a sealed depot outside Baotou, rows of steel giants sit under canvas, waiting for a war nobody hopes to see. For decades, China's ground forces stayed in the shadow of its navy and its missile programs, quietly building one of the largest and most secretive armored fleets on the planet. Today, that fleet numbers in the tens of thousands, tanks born from Soviet blueprints, fighting vehicles shaped by years of careful reverse engineering, and a new generation of machines that owe nothing to Moscow or to anyone else. Some of these vehicles never left a parade ground. Others sit in reserve, half forgotten, waiting for orders that may never come. In the next half hour, we're going to open the gates on every armored vehicle in Chinese ground service, tank by tank, carrier by carrier, gun by gun. Some names you'll recognize immediately. Most, you won't. And by the end, you'll understand why an army that spent decades borrowing other people's tank designs is now quietly building things nobody else has even tried. Chapter 1: Tanks, China's Armored Spearhead. Start with the machine that still forms the backbone of Chinese armor today, the Type 96. Manufactured by Norinco and rushed into service in 1997, it grew directly out of the older Type 88 line and became the first Chinese tank ever armed with a full 125mm smoothbore gun. Around 2,500 of these tanks were eventually built, and even now, upgraded A and B variants carry the weight of entire mechanized brigades on their shoulders. It runs a carousel-style autoloader, fires heat, fragmentation, and APFSDS rounds, and wraps its turret in arrow-shaped FY-4 explosive reactive armor. At just over 41 tons combat weight, it's noticeably lighter than its Western equivalents, which meant China could put more of them on more roads, faster, and keep them running with a smaller logistics tail behind every brigade. Its fire control system, when it first entered service, was actually considered superior to what most T-72 operators had at the time, a rare moment where Chinese electronics led rather than followed. It was never meant to be glamorous. It was meant to be affordable, and in an army this size, affordable wins wars. Affordable had a ceiling though. Enter the Type 99, which entered service in 2001 and quickly became China's answer to Western third-generation tanks. Over 1,300 units, Type 99 and Type 99A combined, now form the core of the PLA's heavy combined arms brigades. Its 125mm ZPT 9.8 gun fires a dart round capable of punching through nearly a meter of steel armor equivalent, and behind that gun sits a laser warning receiver, a compact laser self-defense weapon nicknamed the Light Show by some crews, and enough layered reactive armor to claim protection equal to over 1,000mm of rolled steel. Its commander once described the tank's survivability in an interview as tougher than anything the PLA had ever fielded before it. The tank can also fire a gun-launched anti-tank missile straight down its own barrel, hitting targets over 3 miles away, a trick most rival tanks still can't perform. Its road speed tops out around 80 kilometers an hour, with an operational range near 600 kilometers on internal fuel alone, extendable further with a rear-mounted drum tank for long road marches. Unlike the Type 96, the Type 99 was never built to be cheap. It was built to survive at any cost, and its high price tag is exactly why the older Type 96 never fully disappeared from service. Survival got an upgrade in 2025. That upgrade arrived publicly as the Type 99B, unveiled at the 2025 Victory Day Parade in Beijing. What changed wasn't just armor thickness, it was the entire protection philosophy behind the tank. 2 GL-6 hard-kill launchers now sit on the turret, backed by 4 dedicated fire control radars, able to detect and destroy incoming projectiles before they ever reach the hull, whether they come from the ground or from directly overhead. Add a 360-degree vision system for the crew and a new generation of thermal optics, and you get a tank built less around brute steel and more around never being hit in the first place. Some versions swap the commander's traditional heavy machine gun for a fully remote-controlled weapon station instead, letting the crew engage threats without ever exposing a hatch. This one changed the entire conversation about Chinese armor. Not every tank chased weight though. At the opposite end of the spectrum sits the Type 15, a lightweight tank Norinco unveiled publicly in 2018. Built for mountains, not plains, it was designed to operate at altitudes where a 55-ton Type 99 simply cannot climb without its engine gasping for oxygen. A smaller hull, thinner armor, but still a fully capable main gun and a modern digital fire control system, the Type 15 exists for one reason: terrain that eats heavier tanks alive. The kind of high-altitude, thin-air terrain found along China's most remote and mountainous frontiers, where a lighter vehicle simply outlasts a heavier one. Despite the smaller frame, it still carries an autoloader and modern composite armor modules, proof that lightweight doesn't have to mean underpowered, just carefully compromised. Then came the tank with no real ancestor. The Type 100 is where things get strange. Confirmed in service in September 2025, it's built around a crew of just 2, a number achieved through automation levels no other tank in the world has matched. Not even Russia's long-delayed T-14 Armata, which was designed around similar ideas but never reached anything close to full-scale production. Sensor fusion links the Type 100 in real time to aircraft, artillery, and electronic warfare units, letting the crew see the battlefield from angles no single tank commander ever could alone. It trades some of the old obsession with thick steel for something newer: active protection, reduced weight, and a battlefield awareness system meant to spot the threat before the threat ever spots the tank. A hybrid electric version began field testing in June 2025, quieter on approach, faster off the line, and built to power energy-hungry systems that don't fully exist yet, including future electronic warfare and directed energy equipment still sitting on the drawing board. Engineers involved in the program have even floated the idea of a future 140 or 152 mm main gun should the current 125 mm standard ever fall behind. Though for now, the tank keeps the caliber that served Chinese armor for 4 decades. What's certain is that the tank was never designed as a lone hunter. It was designed as a node, a single point in a much larger web of sensors, guns, and aircraft, all feeding each other data faster than any radio operator ever could. Chapter 2: Tank Destroyers, the Quiet Killers. Long before the Type 99 existed, the PLA needed something that could stop a T-72 without spending tank-level money to do it. The answer was the PTZ-89, a track destroyer that entered service in 1989, carrying a 120 mm smoothbore gun powerful enough to worry any Cold War-era main battle tank on paper. It never fought the war it was built for. The Cold War ended. The threat it was designed to counter faded almost overnight, and today a couple hundred sit quietly in reserve, a solution without its problem, a vehicle that missed its own war by about 2 years. Its low-profile turret and thin-side armor made sense against 1980s threats, but against anything modern, it would struggle, which is exactly why the PLA never bothered retiring it fully. Storage costs less than scrapping, and nobody's in a hurry to make that decision either way. Few people remember this one even existed. Its replacement went a very different direction. The PTL-02 chose wheels over tracks entirely, debuting in 2001 on the WZ-551 chassis. It mounts a 100 mm smoothbore gun and moves at road speeds a tracked vehicle could never dream of matching, well over 80 km an hour on paved surfaces. Around 250 remain in PLAGF service today, valued less for raw firepower and more for the ability to reach a crisis point before the enemy even knows one is coming. Export versions of this same design have since turned up as far away as Myanmar, fielded there under a slightly different local designation. Speed was only ever half the answer. The ZTL-11 answers the other half. Built on the same 8x8 Type 08 chassis that underpins much of the wheeled fleet, it carries a fully turreted 105mm gun derived from the British L7 design, one of the most battle-proven tank guns ever produced anywhere in the world. A gun that armed everything from the American Patton to the British Chieftain decades earlier. Around 1,200 units serve today, giving otherwise lightly armored wheeled formations the ability to punch well above their weight class against light and medium armor. The turret itself is shared, almost bolt for bolt, with the amphibious ZTD-05, a rare case of Chinese engineers standardizing a weapon fit across two completely different chassis to cut costs and simplify training for gunners moving between units. The amphibious version tells its own story. The ZTD-05 takes that same direct fire philosophy and puts it onto an amphibious hull instead. Also armed with a 105mm gun, it can swim ashore ahead of the infantry it supports, providing fire cover the moment boots hit the sand, well before heavier armor could ever make it to the beach. Fewer than 300 are believed to be in service, a small number reserved for a very specific and narrow amphibious assault job, one that only really matters in the opening minutes of a landing, before heavier vehicles have even reached the shoreline. Chapter 3. Infantry Carriers. The backbone nobody talks about. In 1999, the ZBD-04 entered service, and it looked almost exactly like Russia's BMP-3, for good reason. China imported turret and weapon system technology directly from Russian designers back in 1996, then wrapped it inside a fully domestic chassis of its own design. A crew of 7 troops riding in the back, and a 100mm rifled gun capable of firing both HE-frag shells and a laser-guided anti-tank missile with a 4-kilometer range, a weapon that could technically even engage low-flying helicopters in a pinch. The gun itself doubles as a low-velocity mortar tube, letting the crew lob shells in a high arc over obstacles when a flat trajectory won't reach the target. Around 400 of the original model remain scattered across frontline mechanized units even today. Not every version stayed on the ground. The ZBD-03 took that same infantry fighting vehicle concept and made it fall out of the sky. Entering service in 2003, this airborne variant was built light enough to be airdropped alongside paratroopers, trading armor for the ability to arrive exactly where and when it's needed most, deep behind a defensive line, before the defenders can properly react to boots already on the ground. The mainline version chose a very different trade-off. By 2006, the ZBD-04A, sometimes labeled the ZBD-08, had swapped amphibious capability for raw survivability instead. Bolt-on armor panels and side skirts now resist 30mm rounds head-on, at the cost of losing the water jets its predecessor once relied on to cross open water at sea. It kept the same 100mm gun and 30mm coaxial autocannon, but wrapped its crew in noticeably more steel, and gave the commander an independent thermal sight that can spin a full 360 degrees on its own. Its top speed dropped slightly compared to the amphibious original, but nobody in the PLA seemed to mind the trade, since most of these vehicles were never going to swim into combat anyway. Over 2,400 of these are believed to serve today, making it one of the single most numerous fighting vehicles in the entire PLAG-F inventory. Strip the gun turret away, and you get something else entirely. The ZBD-04AAT drops the turret in favor of 8 HJ-10 missile tubes mounted on a rotating launcher, each one capable of punching through 1,400 millimeters of armor at ranges past 6 miles. Only around 100 of these serve in total, but each single vehicle can quietly wreck an entire armored column from a distance most enemy tanks can't even detect it from, let alone return fire against. This one was different from almost everything around it. Amphibious warfare needed its own dedicated carrier too. The ZBD-05 fills exactly that gap. an amphibious infantry fighting vehicle designed between 2000 and 2005 specifically for ship-to-shore assault operations. Armed with a 105mm gun, crewed by 3, and capable of carrying 8 troops across open water before the ramp even drops. Over 500 of these remain in active circulation across PLA, marine, and amphibious formations today. Then the wheels took over completely. The ZBL-08 represents the wheeled half of that same idea, the infantry-carrying heart of the sprawling Type 08 family. Around 3,250 units serve today, each one an 8x8 amphibious hull armed with a 30mm autocannon and HJ-73C guided missiles. This single chassis has been stretched, rearmed, and reshaped into more configurations than almost any other Chinese military vehicle in modern history, from command posts to mortar carriers to full-blown air defense systems. Chapter 4: Wheels and Steel, the Older Guard. Before the Type 08 family ever existed, there was the WZ-551, China's very first wheeled infantry fighting vehicle, a project that began all the way back in 1979, when China had barely begun modernizing its ground forces at all. Certified for service around 1,990 under the designation Type 90, and later Type 92, it eventually spawned over 3,000 units across armored personnel carrier, command, and missile carrier roles. Its 30mm autocannon and HJ-73C missile launch rail made it a direct template that later designs, including the Type 08 family itself, would openly borrow from years later. Engineers even pulled the ventilation and sighting systems from the older Type 86 tracked vehicle to save development time, a shortcut that let the WZ-551 reach the field faster than a fully clean sheet design ever could have. Tracks told a parallel story at the very same time. On tracks, the ZSD-89 filled a similar role, entering service around 1,989 as the Type 89 armored personnel carrier. Depending on configuration, it carries anything from a simple 12.7mm heavy machine gun up to a full 25mm autocannon in its infantry fighting vehicle form. Somewhere between 1,750 and over 2,000 units, including the improved 89A variant, remain distributed across command, ambulance, reconnaissance, and troop-carrying roles right across the force, quietly doing unglamorous work that never makes it into a parade. One reconnaissance version even carries a folding radar mast and a rail for launching small surveillance drones directly from the hull roof. Few people remember these workhorses even exist. The Type 08 family added a lighter cousin of its own. The ZSL-10 strips the Type 08 hull down to its simplest possible job, moving troops safely from point to point without much fanfare. Around 500 units serve, armed with little more than a 12.7mm heavy machine gun, proof that not every armored vehicle needs to punch hard. Some just need to survive the drive and get the infantry to where they're actually needed. One more variant was built purely for water. Nicknamed the Snow Leopard, the ZBL-09 entered service in 2009 as a dedicated amphibious version of the Type 08 platform, purpose-built for river crossings and coastal operations where the standard hull's swimming performance simply wasn't quite good enough for the job at hand. Chapter 5: Guns That Move, Self-Propelled Artillery. The PLZ-89 is the oldest gun featured in this section, a tracked 122mm howitzer that's been quietly supporting mechanized units since the tail end of the 1980s. It's not glamorous, and it was never meant to be. It's the kind of system that shows up in every wargame and every deployment list without ever once making headlines of its own. The working mule of Chinese artillery for over 3 decades running. The next generation aimed considerably higher. The PLZ-05 is China's primary tracked howitzer today, arranged in a layout much like America's own M109, but firing a heavier 155mm shell instead of the older 122mm standard. It represents a real jump in both range and destructive power over the systems that came before it, and it now forms the backbone of the PLA's heavy artillery brigades, with an export version, the PLZ-45, having already found buyers well outside China's own borders. Fully loaded, it can sustain a rate of fire that lets a battery mass shells on a single target from several different firing positions almost simultaneously, a tactic sometimes called a multiple-round simultaneous impact, and one that gives defenders almost no warning before the barrage lands. A lighter platform handled the same job differently. The PLZ-07 took the ZBD-04A chassis and turned it into a 122mm self-propelled howitzer, entering service around 2007. Roughly 350 of the original A model remain, joined by around 150 upgraded B models, giving mechanized infantry divisions organic artillery support that can actually keep pace with the tanks and carriers moving alongside them, instead of falling behind on the march. Sharing a chassis with the infantry carriers it supports also means spare parts and maintenance crews can move between systems without much retraining at all. Wheels found their way into artillery as well. On the Type 08 chassis, the PLL-09 brought self-propelled artillery to wheeled formations, offering both 122 and 155mm gun options on the exact same hull, depending entirely on the mission profile. Around 600 units give China's rapid reaction forces a level of built-in fire support that older, purely wheeled armies simply never had access to in the past. This one rarely gets any attention, and it probably should. Artillery needs cover from the sky too. The PGZ-09 closes out this section, a self-propelled anti-aircraft gun built specifically to protect armored columns from low-flying threats, helicopters, drones, and close support aircraft that would otherwise pick apart a column stuck exposed on an open road with nowhere to hide. Paired autocannons and short-range missiles give it a layered defense envelope, engaging fast movers at range, while still handling slow, hovering targets up close. Chapter 6. Missile Hunters, Killing Armor from a Distance. The AFT-10 missile carrier mounts on 3 different chassis: the ZBD-04A, the ZBL-08, and the FA-MV3 truck, each variant carrying HJ-10 missiles ready to strike far beyond the range of any conventional tank gun in existence. Only around 100 of these dedicated carriers serve, but their job was never about numbers. It's to find an armored column and end it before that column even knows it's being watched from somewhere over the horizon. The missile itself uses a tandem warhead specifically designed to defeat reactive armor, punching through an initial charge before a second, larger charge finishes the job on the vehicle's actual hull. A lighter carrier handles the closer range work. The Dongfeng Mengshi fills that role on wheels, a 4x4 high mobility vehicle converted into the launch platform for the HJ-11 missile system, completing what's officially known as the AFT-11 configuration. It trades the AFT-10's raw range for speed and flexibility instead, able to reposition faster than almost anything else in Chinese service, currently carrying an anti-tank missile, slipping into position, firing, and disappearing again before return fire can find it. Built on a rugged commercial-style 4x4 frame, it can keep pace with light infantry units in terrain that would stop a tracked missile carrier cold. Put all of it together, the tanks, the destroyers, the carriers, and the guns, and you get a force that's spent 3 decades quietly closing the technology gap with the rest of the world, then quietly opening a new one of its own. The Type 100's 2-man crew, the Type 99B's hard-kill defenses, the hybrid electric powertrain now feeding hungry new onboard systems, all of it points toward the exact same idea. Fewer humans riding inside the armor, more sensors watching around it, and machines that talk to each other faster than any single commander ever could process on his own. Reports already suggest the next tank program may share a common chassis with a future infantry carrier. The same concept Russia once attempted and never actually finished, a level of commonality that would slash maintenance costs and training time across an entire generation of vehicles at once. Unmanned ground systems are already deep in testing, built to scout, to resupply, and maybe eventually to fight, all without a single crew member ever stepping inside the vehicle at all. Some of these unmanned platforms are reportedly derived directly from existing IFV chassis, stripped of their crew compartments and rebuilt around remote operators sitting kilometers away. Whatever comes next won't look anything like the Type 96 that opened this list. It might not even need a driver, and in a fleet this large, that single change could reshape everything that came before it.